The biggest OTA yet has just dropped in Marvel Snap. 9 cards had their stats adjusted. No changes to any abilities or text. And usually in the OTAs, the over-the-air changes are just about the numbers. And here are the 9 cards that were changed, which is pretty crazy. There's a few, I would say, meta-defining cards that got adjusted, and a few cards that just weren't seeing a whole lot of play or carry some really fun archetypes that have now been buffed. So we're gonna see if this is actually gonna shift the meta in any sort of way. I'm gonna break down each card individually, and I'm also gonna share 2 deck lists that I think are going to thrive moving forward at the end of the video. But I just wanted to show them all right here real quick if you just wanted to see what was changed and then dip out and jump into Marvel Snap and start playing with these cards. I totally understand. So these are the changes right here. I'm gonna go ahead and say right off the top that I think the Professor X change is probably going to be the most alarming, and then outside of that, probably looking at things like Maximus, Viper, and Ronan, looking like some big changes. Even Black Widow is a pretty dangerous Werewolf. Look at all these changes, man. Okay, let's get into it. So the first one that we got here is Professor X. He went from 5-3 to a 5-1. Now in the top there, I just kind of have cards that I think are going to either be hurt or see an increased play rate with this card. So essentially, Blob was everywhere, right? Blob being played in the Thanos list, and it was running Professor X to lock in a lane, and then you play Blob and you win the game. Huzzah! Well, now your Professor X might not have enough power to carry that other lane. I don't know if Blob's going to see a drop-off in win rate. I doubt it, but you know, this was an important part of that deck at least, so it should change somehow. And then you got Cerebro. Man, I used to love Cerebro 3, and one of the best parts was Professor X because you lock in that lane, you play Cerebro on turn 6, buffing that lane and pushing you over whatever power your opponent had there. It was a lot of fun. I mean, there's alternatives, so it's not like Cerebro is just dead because Professor X was nerfed, but it's a thing. Cerebro 3, look out, you got smacked around. Then on the bright side, maybe you could look at things like Mr. Negative, flipping this card is now a 1-5 and locking in a lane. That's crazy. I mean, of course, you got a negative before, you know, like hopefully as soon as possible, draw that Professor X as soon as possible, and then bam, just lock in that lane and probably win the game from there. So that's actually kind of nasty. And then Daredevil, I actually think gets an increase in value, or at least play with Professor X, because now I think it's all that much more important to know where your opponent's playing and then play that Professor X in the lane that is guaranteed to win. It doesn't really matter if you had 3 power, 1 power, whatever. With Daredevil, you're playing basically where your opponent is not. So I don't see a change in value there. If anything, I think you pair the two more moving forward. But then we also got Ronan getting buffed. This is probably my favorite one because this is such a fun archetype. We're looking at cards like Master Mold, Maximus, Baron Mordo. You could even think of like Iceman, even maybe Spider-Ham. All these sorts of like, you know, disrupting your opponent's hand and breaking their hand so they can't play a lot of cards, so that your Ronan is really big. That deck just got buffed pretty substantially, especially with that Maximus change. But yeah, I'm really happy. The scaling here is pretty wild if you think about it. You know, he's still getting +2 for every card in your opponent's hand. If they have at least 2 cards, we're looking at a 5-9 now. That's really good. Now, of course, he still gets countered by a whole bunch of stuff like, you know, your opponent playing cards or Enchantress, Rogue, these sorts of things. But then you still got a 5-5 chilling, and that ain't awful. I mean, it's not great. We don't want to do that, but if we have to, it's not the worst thing. So I like this change a lot. And then before, you know, there was kind of a Ronan Mr. Negative package, and, you know, it wasn't all that good, but it was a thing, and now you can't really do that anymore. But anyways, this is great for Ronan. I'm excited to see where this deck goes because it's pretty fun. All right, after that, we got the Maximus change. So this one's pretty spicy. Before, Maximus was kind of a staple in Silver Surfer lists because he's a 3-7 that goes to a 3-9 off of that Surfer buff. Now he's a 2-6 and does not fit in Silver Surfer anymore. He's not a 3-cost. He's not going to receive that buff. Now, there's been alternatives that have kind of taken his place already in those lists. So I don't know if it really hurts his viability that much going to a 2-drop. And only losing 1 power, going to a 2, is amazing. A 2-6 is a great stat line in Marvel Snap. And yes, you have the downside of making your opponent draw 2 cards, but we can actually put that to our advantage. And things like Ronan or using Sarah on turn 5 to play Maximus on turn 6 as a 1-6 is so good. I could see like a hit monkey list popping off where you play a bunch of cards that have good amounts of power and you can play them for super cheap on turn 6 after Sarah. So Pretty neat. I like this change a lot. Might be my favorite one. This one and the Ronan one, and they work together. So I'm excited to try a deck out with the two of those cards. But then we also have Black Widow. This one weirds me out a little bit, and I think in general, I think it's good. But with Black Widow, I think the value is playing her early, stopping your opponent from drawing early so that your options are a little bit more limited later on. I did see a lot of instances where you play her on turn 5 so your opponent can't draw that 6 card that they might be relying on, and then they go into that final turn. That's still viable here, being a 3-drop, but it's a little bit more expensive for that ability, which I already didn't love. So time will tell. I mean, she does get 2 points of power, and then essentially when the Black Widow, the Widow's Bite rather, is played, that's -1. You could almost look at this as like a 3-4 in statistic value, also taking up a spot on your opponent's side of the board, and of course, denying a draw. So I don't think Black Widow is nerfed in this change at all, but I don't know if she's necessarily buffed. She's just, it's kind of like a rework almost. And then, you know, Darkhawk kind of takes a little bit of a hit because you wanted to play Black Widow on turn 2 and then your Rock Slide on turn 3 and then Darkhawk on turn 4. That was kind of a nice line of play. Now she's kind of conflicting with Rock Slide, and Rock Slide's clearly better for Darkhawk, so I think she actually ends up getting cut in those lists. But now she can get buffed from Surfer, so maybe that's a thing. Probably not. Moving on. The Punisher received a buff. How hyped are you guys? Come on, let's go. I think a lot of people have been calling this for a while. Now, it's not a lot, but it's interesting, dude. Okay, so already before, if a full location was on the opposite side of Punisher, he would be a 3/6. Well, now he has the potential to be a 3/7. That's pretty good. I think we could be happy with that. And of course, he has ongoing synergies with like Spectrum or even Onslaught, but I don't know if you necessarily want to do that. But what I was thinking, dude, what about junk decks? There's so many tools now for junk. I think actually splashing in a Punisher just for that high power upside to overcome a location that you've already stuffed could be something. I don't know. We'll see. So like Debris, Annihilus with the Hood, Sentry, this sort of thing, and you throw in a Punisher as a finisher card at that location. Could be a thing. Time will tell. In theory, Mojo seems good, but often you don't have a lot of spaces on your side of the board. So I like just solo Punisher at a clogged location to win it out. Kind of neat, kind of spicy. We'll see what happens. Then after that, we got Viper Change. Now this one's super weird to me, and altogether, I think this is a nerf. Yes, she does get 1 more point of power, but she does become a 3 cost, which is awkward because the best line of play with Viper tended to be the Hood Viper play. It's like a combo we've known about forever in Marvel Snap, and now it's just a little bit more clunky. You kind of have to do something on turn 2, and then you play the Viper, and are you that excited at that point in time? I don't know. And then, of course, as she gets higher in cost, she's just getting closer to Annihilus, when Annihilus just does such a better job at swinging those cards over. So I don't like this change. Now, they mentioned about Havoc in the comments, but I think a lot of people are starting to realize that the Havoc Viper combo is not as good as a lot of people thought. I thought it might be one of his viable avenues, but I tried it and I don't love it. There's other ways to play Havoc, and honestly, so far statistically, he doesn't have very good win rates. So like, I don't see why we had to preemptively do this. I guess they were nervous about it being too toxic to play against, but I don't think it would have been that bad. Anyways, this is my least favorite change of the bunch. Of course, I like junk decks as well, so I'm a little bit biased. Next up is Werewolf. So Werewolf was a 3/3, and that was a sweet spot because you could play a bunch of on reveals, you know, turn 4, 5, and 6. Now he's a 4/4. Makes it that much more hard to actually play a bunch of cards after you've played Werewolf, because he's a 4-drop, right? If you don't get to play him till 5, and then it's just a lot clunkier, and he only got 1 point of power. So this is, in my eyes, certainly a nerf. He's also competing now with Loki, and the two are doing really well in the same deck together because Loki gets you a bunch of discounted cards that hopefully have on reveals, and you'll play a whole bunch of them, and boom, your Werewolf is just bouncing around and popping off and growing in power. And now, yeah, I just don't love it. And not to mention, before the scaling with +2 at an odd number got you to 9 maybe before you got into Shang-Chi range. Now it's a lot easier. All you need is 3 triggers and you go into the Shang-Chi range. I don't know if that's, that worrisome. Of course, Werewolf can dodge Shang-Chi, so we weren't worried about that too much in the past. But yeah, I think altogether it's a nerf. And then, of course, you can discount it now with Zabu as a 4 cost, but I don't know about a deck with that. There could be maybe some Wong werewolf shenanigans, who knows? But they don't work all that great together. So time will tell, but this seems like it's going to hurt the old dog here. Okay, next up. Next, we have Martyr going from 1-4 to 1-5. So Martyr has been the worst card in terms of win rate, and it's been a few weeks. Geez, has it been like 3 weeks already or 4 weeks? I don't even know. But this is the worst release ever in Marvel Snap history. No card has ever had a lower win rate than Martyr has, and probably rightfully so. She tries to actually lose you the game, but funny enough, that ability almost never comes into play, and now that she has 5 power, there's even less chance that it comes into play. So you know what? I think I like Martyr now. Like, this is a crazy good stat line for very little downside, or at least downside that might not affect you very frequently. So I think there could be a place for Martyr now. Watch out. Who knows? It's kind of like when you see Titania pop in a few lists. Titania actually has the upside of clogging your opponent's board in these situational moments. But I would say that they're pretty comparable now in terms of their upside, downside stat line potential, right? Interesting. I don't know. We'll see. And then Cerebro 5, anybody? Huh? Maybe with the Doom bots back to 5 power and Martyr could be a thing. Shanna buff because, you know, she could accidentally spawn Martyr. So there you go. And then lastly, I think this is the last one. We got Gladiator going back to his data mined version of a 3/8. Okay. So when this card was a 3/8, I said it was super broken, but then we learned about on reveals and ongoings triggering, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not going to be so great anyways. And he lost that point of power. It's interesting to see it go from the data mine version and then quickly change right before release to 3/7, only to go back to that 3/8. We haven't seen a stat line like this in Marvel Snap. 3/8 is very, very good. I mean, of course, there's the downside of accidentally spawning something that you don't destroy and then not being able to get rid of it, helping your opponent out with those on reveals and ongoings. We've seen it already, but Gladiator was already kind of hovering around a 50% win rate. Man, I feel like the Surfer list with Shaw and Gladiator could kind of do work now. It was already kind of his home, and I think this is just a straight buff, especially since now he could destroy anything with 7 or less power. And the only notable cards that I thought of were Annihilus and Onslaught. Not even that great of options, because Annihilus, if he gets pulled from Gladiator, he's going to activate his ability. So maybe that's okay because we do it early enough, but maybe that's terrible because, you know, they weren't going to draw Annihilus in the first place, and now you got a Void on your side and a Hood and all these things. So you got to watch out. That might not work out. And then Onslaught could be good, but Onslaught isn't played all that much. So you could see this in the Surfer list with Shang-Chi even closer in range, you know, Shang-Chi destroying anything with 10, Gladiator taking out things with 7 or less, getting closer in range, and then Forge to buff it up so you pretty much kill everything. It's interesting. There you go, guys. So lastly, I've got these decks here. I'll have the links in the description below. Now, the top one there, I've been running, and it's crazy. Seriously, take this for a spin. And I know you're going to look at this, you're going to be like, what is he saying? That's a Darkhawk list. That ain't going to work. Blobs everywhere. Trust. This crushes the blob matchup, okay? Leech should be in a lot of decks right now. Leech is so good. Not a lot of people see it coming. Snap before you leech, and you'll get a bunch of cubes. You're going to destroy that blob, and if you don't destroy it with the leech, you got the Shang-Chi and the Shadow King to deal with it appropriately. Like, there's just so much control with that list. And then Miss Marvel is still one of the highest win rate cards. Darkhawk is still better than Blob right now in terms of win rate, so he's still doing great. Korg, Rockslide, man, it's just a good list. And I think Dr. Doom might be the best 6-drop in the game at this point in time. Now, the bottom list is just kind of a theory craft based on some of these changes and something I want to try out. And it's essentially just taking advantage of Ronan and using Maximus at a cheap rate with maybe a Wong combination to make them draw like 4 cards on the final turn, using Goose because you can play Maximus at the Goose location, a bunch of these other cards there. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be good. I also wanted to mix in Mystique maybe. Look, it's just kind of a shell, and you could just plug in a few cards that you want to try out. But I'm just excited to play like Master Mold again and Maximus and Ronan. That just seems like a good time. There you go. That's it. That's the OTA. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have fun. Test out these decks, man. I'm telling you, that top deck, watch out. It's good. All right. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you guys next time.